Welcome to the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast. Tune in every Thursday as we share inspirational stories from the world's greatest creators, entrepreneurs, and go-getters about how they've turned life's lemons into lemonade. And now, here's your host of Lemonade Stand Stories, Sharon Prabhaka.
What is going on, guys? This is Sharon Prabhaka with the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast, and I'm here today with Janae Thompson. I've had the privilege of meeting Janae. Oh my gosh, when was this? Was it November of last year, I believe?
Yes, at a rockin' party, of course.
Yes.
Because that's how we roll.
That's how we roll. That's how we roll. And got to hear your story, have some great conversations, and I was just so impressed. And the interesting thing was, I knew your story from a different perspective, but it was so great to actually connect with you and to talk to you. And I'm really excited to go more in depth with you on your whole experience. But so guys, Janae and her husband Grant started a YouTube channel. How many years ago was this now?
It was 2000. Oh gosh. It was 2008 when we made the channel, but it was 2011 when we actually started it. And the 2008 might be, we'll just say 2011.
2011. Okay. And the channel was called The King of Random. And Grant was creating all these cool scientific experiments, all these awesome videos on there, and it blew up. Right.
Yeah.
Massively. Exploded. And you guys were pre-Mark Rober, I believe, right?
Oh, yes. We were the OGs of YouTube. There was not YouTube. When we started YouTube, there was no such thing as a YouTuber.
Wow. So you guys started forever ago, blew up this channel, got a lot of followers, and Grant's personality was just so fun and so captivating, and tons of people loved watching his videos, watch all the stuff, learn science. I mean, he's like the modern Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But, this is the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast, and life deals you lemons.
Yes, it does.
And it does. And some of them can be very, very heavy lemons. And I know it dealt you some pretty big lemons. So I don't want to talk any more about that. I would rather have you share the story. But Janae, thank you so much for being so brave and vulnerable and coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's an honor.
Yeah, but I would love to know, from your perspective, tell us the journey of when this all started, and then some of the tragic things, and now what's the future?
Yeah. So, what started this all was this belief in following the desire to find the expression of creativity. So what I mean by that is Grant had this amazing mind that just was insatiable, had to know everything. And, we connected when we were dating and all that, because I'm a lot the same way. And we're both really okay, what's the next thing? How can we learn? How can we become better? What's the next thing that's going to help us to improve and become the version of ourselves we're meant to be? That's kind of what our philosophy is, learn to progress in every moment. And there's always the next question. What's the next question? And so for him, that kind of looked like, okay, pull out a video camera. And it all started with a light switch. He turned on a light switch and he was like, if the world were to end and the apocalypse happened today, I don't actually know how to recreate that if it wasn't happening because of, what's already happened. So then he was like, I want to know how the world works. And that was the premise of starting the YouTube channel. And it was also one of those times in life where opportunity meets preparedness, right?
Sure.
We had the handy cam with the cassette tapes that you'd put in when video technology was fairly new to the masses. And he just was enthralled with videoing his life. And he had this philosophy that if it's not on video, it didn't happen. So he was kind of in this phase before, YouTube and even the internet, that he would video things. And so he had that experience behind him. And when we got together, we were doing real estate, and we bought our first homes right next to each other. That's kind of how we met, and then we got roommates to pay for our mortgages. And
smart.
He was 23, I was 23, he was 25-ish. And so we were both in our first houses and kind of starting out. And, again, it goes back to that insatiable, how can I do this process better? So when I was 23 and I wanted to get a house, not a lot of 23-year-olds buy their own house right out of the gate, and single woman, but it was one of those things that I was like, how can I maximize this experience of going to school and, progressing my future? So I bought this house, and he had done the same thing, and we got roommates, and they were paying for our mortgages, and, it was awesome. So he was impressed that way. I was impressed that way with him. And we just really connected on that level. So then fast forward after we got married, we decided, this was in 2008 when kind of that real estate recession was happening.
For sure. Yeah, it was crazy.
And we decided to sell all of our properties. We had about 10 at the time. And we were cash flowing like $10,000 a month at the time, which is like amazing for, you know, a couple of young kids. But we decided we'd get rid of all that. We rented this little basement apartment. It was $800 a month for everything. We had one kid, and we just said, we're going to hunker down for this time. We're going to wait for the market to bottom out, and then we're going to try and pay cash for a house. That was our objective.
Awesome.
So during those 2 years we were renting that basement apartment, we just saved money and experimented, and we created all these different experiments, and that became the content for what would later become the King of Random. So during those 2 years, it was like we were just exploring and doing all these experiments. And how to light a fire with a water bottle was the first one, and we filmed it in that basement apartment.
Awesome.
Outside on the garbage cans is where that took place.
Fantastic.
So our first video was trash, but
literally.
Yeah. But that's kind of where it was all born. And from that point on, we did go ahead and, you know, buy this house that we had this goal for. And then that's where the King of Random was born.
That's amazing. And so you guys created this, and you created like these awesome experiments and all these fun things and put them on YouTube. Mm-hmm. At what point were you like, hey, this is actually working?
Yeah.
Right? Because YouTube, it's like a crazy wild west, especially back then.
Yes.
I would feel, right?
Yes.
So when was it when you put stuff out and you're like, oh my gosh, people are actually starting to watch this?
Yeah. So our first video that went viral was actually the fire water bottle at the apartment. And we put it on YouTube. It had this Katy Perry music as the background. So we got a copyright strike, but it got like 100,000 views. And
Awesome.
We were like, whoa, what's happening? And then all of a sudden it's like, we are getting a new subscriber. And Grant's like, why do we keep getting these emails of new subscribers? This is so dumb. Can I turn this off? It's really annoying. And they just kept coming. Then we kind of started learning there's people making a living on YouTube, and there's a business here that could be made. And our objective was not necessarily to make a business, but I think that we did start the whole process with that as the intention, but not the objective, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And so from the beginning, we created it as if it were a 10 million subscriber YouTube channel.
Wow.
Now, there was obviously a lot of refinement that came through that process, because our first video was not a 10 million subscriber channel video. But with that kind of as, you know, the goal, and we hit 50,000 once we started releasing videos on the regular. And
now, when you say on the regular, do you mean like once a week?
Yeah.
Once every couple of weeks? What was the schedule?
With a schedule. I think the schedule when we started was like once a week, or maybe even once a month. But with YouTube, what the algorithm connects with is regularity and consistency. And so if you're posting every day and then you go to once a week, it's like the consistency drops off. But if you're posting once a month and you post every month, that picks up as consistency.
Cool.
So that's kind of like an inside, you know, secret. And the algorithms have changed a lot. But
I was going to say that because I remember I've got a good buddy, Devin Graham, who is huge on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I remember when he was starting YouTube off, it was like, you got to go 2 minutes or less for your videos, 2 minutes or less. And you have to release like every Tuesday, Thursday at 10 a.m. or whatever it was, whatever the rules were, right?
Yep.
And then everything changed all the time.
Yep. And then it was 10 minutes. If it's not 10 minutes, then, you know, like the revenue's like half. If it's 9.59, it's half of what it would be if it was 10.
Wow.
You know, so there's all those little intricacies that you learn along the way, and then they change.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a lemon in and of itself.
Yeah, right. Everything's always changing all the time. So at what point were you like, hey, this is a sustainable business? Like, we're going to go for it.
So I would say within the first 2 months, it was like the first month we made $100 on YouTube. The second month we made $300. So maybe it was 6 months into it, which is quite fast for YouTube. And then it was like $1,000, and then it just kept exponentially growing.
Amazing.
And when you see that pattern, it's like, whoa, this is something. So let's keep doing what we're doing. And we got to 50,000 subscribers, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So I got Grant this bouquet of lighters because a bouquet of flowers just didn't seem appropriate. And,
Smart.
And I was like, okay, we got to celebrate, you know? And then by the next week, we were already at 100,000 subscribers. So it just went like that once the momentum starts going. And in life, you know, like that's what happens no matter what path you're on. If you're following the passion and this deep desire that we had to discover and share what we were discovering, that's the creativity that when, you know, you're living in that space and that energy, it guides your actions to create momentum.
One of the things I love about what you guys are doing is you legitimately are creating your own path, and it's beautiful. Like, we've discussed this before. I'm an actor, producer. I've been working in film for a long time. And when I was in LA acting, I still felt like I was a bit of a puppet, meaning the agent would say, hey, you got to go to this audition. So I go to this audition, even if I wasn't even excited about the audition. And I'd go and I'd say my lines. And if I got it, then great. If I didn't, then next audition. Right. And it was kind of creating my own path, but not really, because I still felt very confined by this world that they presented before me.
Right.
I moved back to Utah because I wanted to create my own movies, my own TV shows. And it feels a lot more fulfilling for me because it's like, hey, this is my voice. This is my baby. This is what I'm creating. I feel like you guys from a very early age, or not early age, like from YouTube, right, decided, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to create what's in my heart and my soul. And like you said, it created the momentum and it created your own audience, an audience that likes to watch your stuff.
Yes.
So I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I'd love to comment on that because like your experience is a lot of people's experiences. You know, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur or have that, you know, responsibility of creating everything on their own. But the way that you approach that, because the other aspect of this dream that we were creating is Grant was, when I married him, he was a full-time employed pilot. And there's a lot of benefits that come with a full-time employed job. You know, we had health insurance, we had stability, we had all that. And by the time our YouTube income was double our job income, Grant, he was very conservative. He still didn't want to quit his job. He liked having that structure and that thing to fall back on. But what I wanted to comment on is the intention behind it. Like when you're in LA and you're, you know, going to these auditions that you're told to go to, you know, you're learning and having a lot of experience. And if that structure works well for you, if you're going into that with the intention of, I'm making this decision and I'm going to create the experience that I want, whether or not somebody told me to, you still get to create your own path with this fullness of expression. Now you made another decision to, you know, to let go of that. And that's this beautiful following your heart. And when you're listening to that, it creates that path again in the most powerful way. And so whether you're being told what to do or you're just saying, I'm just going to create this on my own, the intention that we had was, we are going to learn and create no matter what life deals us or what we decide to create.
Right. And I love that you did that, right? Because in the end, it was still your choice.
Yes.
It wasn't like someone was telling you, this is what you have to do.
Right.
It's like, okay, here's the circumstances and we are going to create and we're going to do it. So your channel started exploding and you guys started doing all these cool videos and all these things. What would you say was like one of your most amazing videos that was like that emotionally impacted us a ton as well?
Yeah. Okay. So our highest viewed video or in the top is our Lego gummies. And that's where, you know, the joy of building Legos, right? We all have experiences with Legos. Just about.
I still do. Yes.
And that's also one of those things that it's like, if I can sit and play Legos with my kids, it's amazing. And then it's like, what if we could build the Legos and then eat the Legos? Obviously you can't do that with real Legos. So how can we do that? And so we created this recipe out of Jell-O and, you know, made it more solid versus the jiggly and, you know, all the little intricacies that take some thought in like, how do we create that? And, you know, how much gelatin do you add? And you have to increase that. And then we made these Jell-O Legos and like, the making of the mold was a project for that, and then the pouring of the gummies, and then the whole process of how to make the Jell-O a different kind of structure so it works for that. And we made all these videos out of that, and everything was an experience. And it was something people could replicate at home. So we had a lot of people that would come to us and be like, we made your Lego gummies, and we built them, and it was this amazing family experience. And actually, Mark Rober sent us a Lego gummy. He and his boy made Lego gummies.
Amazing.
And, like a little TKOR sign out of it about 4 years ago. He sent that to our family, and that was really cool and meaningful. And
that's awesome.
It was just, that's one of those experiments that really touched people. And then the other one that was just, people just connected with this, which kind of surprised me, but it was the oh gosh, what's it called? It's the crucible. And I'm forgetting the word of it, but anyway, it's this thing that you make to melt metal, the metal melter.
Yeah.
And so many people replicated that. Like they could take the video and recreate what we'd done in the video to precision, so it worked every time. And that was another one of the objectives, is how can we give information in the most concise way that allows someone to not only understand it, but they can replicate it if they want.
I love that, right? Because then it's like an applicable thing, like an actual teaching tool.
Mm-hmm.
A buddy of mine, he made this video about this like Starship Trooper coming out of a swimming pool and flying away.
Yeah.
And it was cool. And he got like about 3,000 views or something. Then he made another video talking about how he made that video. Mm-hmm. Way more views.
Interesting.
Way more views. And he's like, what the heck? He's like, so people love the actual making of, because they understood, oh, these are the cool things that you could do to make that happen.
Yeah.
So I love that you guys did that, and you benefited so many people, and like helped your vision and your heart helped so many other people have identities, which is such a powerful thing to say and to feel, right? And I think that's one of the powerful things of YouTube. Now, we talked about this a little earlier. Life can give you lemons, and it hit you guys pretty hard.
Yeah.
It hit you personally very hard.
Very. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd love to like kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
So can you kind of talk us through some of the things that happened and like where the future is now for you?
Yeah. So we were kind of at the height of our success. Everything was going really well.
What year is this roughly, would you say?
So I'd say around 2017, 18, we started bringing on people to help us. And Grant finally quit his job. I would say it was like 2017. So almost 10 years he kept his job. Now he, put his hours down really low so he could work the minimum like towards the last few years, but he finally quit his job. And that was a freedom step for us, because it was like, what's the opportunity cost now to tying yourself to something where they give the direction, right?
Sure.
And it was a big decision because it was a lot of safety. Like, can I let go of this, and can I really do this myself? And we made that decision. It was powerful. And then we hired some people to help us. And then it got to the point where there was some burnout, and Grant really wanted to step away, and we were able to get a team in place to allow that to happen. And so we started discovering this new life freedom, like what's the next thing we want to direct our life into? And it became, we had 4 boys at the time. We just had our last baby, and he's about a year old. And we were like, we want to focus on the boys. We want to have life experiences. We want to do this. And so we really started opening up to the world and to experiences. And previous to this, we'd kind of just been, hunkering down into work.
Sure.
And we're not really going to do much outside that. We stayed home every weekend. We kind of let our friends go. We kind of just really focused on work. And I would say, I have a mantra now that I always make the right decisions. And I would say that's a regret. And at the same time, I don't know that I'd go back and change it. But what it teaches me now is to create the balance that you really desire in every moment of your life versus feeling like there's an extreme that you have to live. Mm-hmm. And the extreme that we chose before this time was work. Like, we're going to do everything to create this business versus, when we're done with that, then we'll take care of the family and we'll spend more time and we'll do those experiences and activities. And so we were like, now it's time. It's time. And so we bought a motorhome. We bought a home in St. George, and we were like, we're just going to travel and we're going to do this. And then Grant was like, my life dream, one of them is to become a power paraglider. And I was like, all right, that sounds great. He'd always been into skydiving and extreme sports, and he was a pilot. And so, his love was in being in the air. And I loved that for him. And he was so competent that I was like, if anybody's qualified to be on one of those, it's him.
Yeah.
And so,
and I've done that before. So I know what it's like.
Yeah,
so.
It's intense, and I've never been on one. And, I thought I would like to go on one, and then I decided against it. But he just felt so alive doing that. And, it was almost this Superman mentality that, nothing can happen to me that he had. And I trusted him 100%. Our relationship was solid, and we just we had this dynamic where we could just go back and forth and be like, I support you, you support me, and it works every time. And so I believed him, that nothing's ever going to happen to him. So you can go do whatever you want. It's just fine. And, other women would come up to me and be like, oh, aren't you scared that your husband's doing this? And I'm like, no, not at all. I trust him. He's so safe. He knows more than the majority of power paragliders that are out there. So, I just think that he's living his dream, and I love that for him. And, and then I'd put this little disclaimer, and, if something were to happen, I just feel really confident that, when it's our time to go, it's our time to go.
Sure.
So, that's what he did. And we ended up, I moved out to St. George in March. He'd gone out there previously so he could get all of his routes on the paragliding,
certifications, all that jazz. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I moved out in March. And that's when we started our life. We were homeschooling the boys. We planned all these trips, and he'd go power paragliding every single day. And he just would come back filled with this exuberance and life force vitality that he was just like, I love my life. It was amazing. And, and I was doing yoga teacher training. That was one of my dreams, is to become a yoga teacher. And so I had been at my yoga teacher training retreat the week before. So he'd had the kids for a whole week, and he was like, oh, I really want to go flying again today. He'd already gone once, and I was like, okay, he's like, I'll be back at 9:30. And would you let the 2 older kids stay up tonight so I can put them to bed? And I was like, yeah, sure. That'd be great. And so he went out. And 9:30 came and went, and the neighbors called me, and I started getting this interesting feeling that something was off. And then the neighbor called, and they're like, hey, is Grant back? Because I mean, his truck is parked in its usual spot, but his power paraglider's not on there, and it's after dark, and regulations are you can't be out after dark. And he was very good at following those. And I was like, yeah, that's really weird. I don't know what's going on. Tried to call him, no answer. And what was really interesting about that is that afternoon, so maybe 6 hours before this 9:30 dilemma, I had said, hey, Grant, can you just remind me how to find you on your GPS, just in case anything ever happens? Because I know you showed me, but it was 4 months ago. I don't remember at all. And yeah. I want to make sure that if anything were ever to happen, I could find you. And he's like, yeah, sure. He pulls out his phone. Here's the app. Here's how you do it. And I'm like, okay, great. And then here's how you do it on my computer. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Thanks. And then, it's 10 o'clock and I'm like, where is he? And I pull up the computer. I'm like, okay, his GPS says he's right here. Well, I know that this is a very spotty place for reception. I knew that he was going out to that area and he was stationary in that area, at least his GPS was. So I was like, okay, in my mind, I'm never going to go to worst case scenario. It was in the back of my mind, but I was like, probably what happened is he ran out of gas and he's on this cliff and he's just crap, I don't have reception. So I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, okay, I better drive out there and just go get him, so he's not embarrassed and, that he did this stupid thing. And my neighbors are kind of looking at me like, I think maybe we should call the police. And I was like, why? He's going to be mad at me if I call the police and he just ran out of gas and I didn't come get him because, he'll just be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to leave my kids sleeping at my house and I'm going to go drive an hour to pick him up. And, the neighbors are like, no, we should call the police first and see if they can help find him. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess that's a good idea. So at 10:30, I did put in a call to the police and they just took it from there. And they were basically like, you need to stay home. And I was like, whoa, there's nothing I can do. I don't like this feeling of helplessness. Yeah. I want to go find him or I want to go do something. And it just turned into this night of waiting and waiting and waiting. Oh, and man. I finally was like, okay, so I left lights on because I was like, I don't want him to think that we just like fell asleep and, you know, went to bed without him coming home. Like that would feel so uncaring if I were to come home and everybody was asleep when they didn't know where it was, you know?
Sure.
And so I kept the lights on. I finally put the kids to bed, and, you know, at like 2:30, I'm like, man, I'm tired. Like this is going to be rough tomorrow if I don't get some sleep. So I'm like, I'm going to try and sleep, but I'm going to keep the light on. Fell asleep. 3:30, my doorbell rings. Wake up, run to the door. And then I'm looking for Grant, you know, out, and there's 4 men standing out there. I'm like, why are none of them Grant? And then it's like, if Grant was here, he wouldn't ring the doorbell, you know, but it's those things that it's like, you start to not put reality together. Right.
Sure.
So I see these 4 men, there's 2 officers, there's some clergy from my neighborhood church. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of odd. They're like, can we come in? Yes, of course. You know, like, did you find Grant? And they're like, yeah, we found Grant. Oh, good. Mm-hmm. And no, it's not good. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, are we going to go to the hospital? So then, and by this point, I already knew, but I would not believe it until it was confirmed, because there's no way that it would have taken that long if he was okay. And I would have heard back from him by now. Like I knew those things logically, subconsciously, I could not and would not process them until someone told me. So then the officer was like, we found your husband. He's been in an accident. He didn't survive. And the first words out of my mouth were, I know. So the officer kind of looked at me and was like, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. And he's like, so he repeated himself. And I was like, I know. Mm-hmm. And from that point, I was just like, okay, now it's confirmed. And I just kind of went to this like other place, like disconnection from reality again. Like, but at the same time, accepting it in this way that like, you know, this is going to change everything. Yeah. I don't know how. And my life isn't different yet, but it's like this whole world spun around, and this was my new world. And, you know, how am I going to navigate this? Right.
It's interesting when things like this happen, and in one fall swoop, like the entire landscape of your life completely has changed. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, we had dreams, we had plans, you know, we got married with the promise of being together for the rest of our lives. Right. And, you know, we're going to have kids together, which in my mind meant we're going to raise them together. And now he's gone. So I didn't ever want to raise 4 kids as a single mom. And that was like one of the most important things to me in my life, was that I would choose a man that would be a wonderful father to my kids, because I wanted my kids to always have a father. So my first thought after they told me was, my kids don't have a dad. Like, this is the whole premise of like why I chose like a really good family type oriented man, because I wanted my children to grow up with a father. And now that's being taken from me. And like, now I'm going to have all the problems of kids that don't have dads, you know? I mean, it was just that immediate like reactionary fear. And so all of those dreams and all of those plans and everything that we had put into place, it was all gone. And it's like, okay, the slate is wiped clean. And I made all these decisions based on us being together. So now what am I going to do?
Right. Did you, during this time, what was your source of comfort? What was your source of peace and hope? Because the thing is like when you have something so drastic, when you have so many plans and visions of the future suddenly changed, did you feel like hope just get pulled away as well, or were you able to like hang on, or how did that go for you?
I felt everything just completely pulled away. I started on this completely new trajectory of everything in my life that I thought was real isn't real, because I didn't have this like even notion of the possibility of anything changing. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons why that could be, but I felt like I was almost always living in the future, like not quite being present, because it was always like I was making plans. I was making plans for the next thing and what's the next thing, versus being really present. And in my mind at that time, the next thing was something I created. And when something outside of my plan comes into that, it takes away my power to create what I had said I was going to create. And this was a revelation, shocking revelation to me, that I didn't have control over everything in my life. Yeah. And I didn't like that. And so I it rocked every aspect of my way of thinking, my way of life, just the mentality, my emotionality. And so it wasn't just the death, it was like the death of my life because I was now unable to fix this.
Yeah. It's interesting. When COVID hit, that was a shock to the world, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was like, what? The world can shut down?
Yeah, this can happen.
This can happen?
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend of mine, but from I think 2020 to now, I think I've lost like 15 people or so.
Wow.
Some close to me, some acquaintances, but like, my grandpa passed away, some friends passed away, not all from COVID, but it was so weird how many people passed away.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting because I remember thinking, wow, if you think you have control, you are living in an illusion.
Yes.
Because those things can be changed so quickly. Like, I think what I do have control over is how I react to the fact that my life is completely out of control. So in this circumstance, when your entire world has changed, your entire worldview has changed, how did you pick up the pieces?
Yeah. So it took a long time. And I'm still going through that process, right? And I'm learning that it's a never ending process. Like when something like this happens, and every experience in our life is actually like this, it's just the degree to which it affects the overall functioning of your life, right? So, and that's where every decision you make, it culminates in this creation of who you are, which is why every decision is so important and why my mantra is I always make the right decisions. But, I did lose hope. I was like, I didn't want to engage in life the way it was because it was so different. And I think I spent the first year kind of just in shock and taking it one day at a time, because that was really, or even just 1 hour at a time or 1 minute at a time. And, my word for that year became grace. Like, and I wasn't fully present to it because I wanted to, I kept trying to make the plans and then it wouldn't work. And I kept trying to make another plan and it wouldn't work. And every plan I had tried to make felt like it was being sabotaged. And I'd never really like experienced it in that way before. Because I felt like I was unstoppable. And now I'm feeling like I'm being stopped at every corner.
And I've had that happen before. And it's so tough, right? When sometimes I start questioning, why do I even make plans then?
Right.
Like, why do I even do anything? Because it's going to get crushed.
Yep.
Right. And it's a tough place to be. So you say you were taking things one day at a time, but then you got introduced to a word, grace. And I want to explore that a little bit.
Yeah.
At what point did you start allowing grace to come into your life, to take over in your own life?
Yeah. So it was when I realized if I stop controlling things and if I allow things to be as they are, and then I make a decision from that place, that space in between what I want and things as they are, and then accepting them and making a decision from this place, that's grace. And I didn't realize it until the second year, really, because as I looked back, I felt like I've been carried in the hand of grace. And it became the meaning of my life. And I learned how to live in grace constantly. And that allowed me to give myself this acceptance in all things. And then this is where I started having the insight and ability to make decisions from the place of where we're at versus always trying to change things. And that's where the plans came in. It's like, okay, here's a problem, here's the plan. And now it's like, here's a problem. What is this problem here for? What's causing it? What am I supposed to learn from it? And it just is like, I can live in this and accept it. And I can now know this is not going to be the reality forever. Like with one of my kids, if it was a behavior issue, it's like, I just wanted to change it immediately. But now it's like, okay, this is a part of the, phase that they're in. It's not going to be forever. And I can just like sit and allow it to be what it is. And I don't have to change it.
Yeah.
And that made it so I can step into this space where I can let it be. And this was another emotional process that I went through. In the past, I always wanted to control my emotions. I wasn't like an emotional woman, really. Like I felt things, but I didn't cry. Crying was kind of like okay, what's the point of that?
I still feel that way sometimes, so I get it.
And it's not that I didn't want to. I wanted to connect with those things, but I was kind of raised in an environment where it was like, you know, everything's good. Like, let's always look at the positive. Like, let's just pretend like, okay, you're sad, but just let's look at something good instead. And I realized that wasn't a healthy way to approach reality, because like you said, you're living in an illusion, and then it becomes a delusion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I just really was able to say, okay, this is how I do this, and this is what is, and I'm really sad, and I'm just going to be really sad, instead of trying to have a positive mantra, or, you know, feeling like, okay, like I'll just think about something happy. Like, there's nothing happy that I can think about. There were good things in my life still, but none of it changed my reality. And it felt like I was waking up to a nightmare. So when I went to sleep, that was where I found peace. So every morning I would wake up in this panic, feeling like, okay, when do I get to go to sleep again? And like, that's not living. Like, that's a really dark, deeply sad place to be. And I think, you know, most of us experience that at one time or another, or if you haven't, you will, because life hands you challenges that you don't feel like you can overcome sometimes.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? I mean, because I'm an actor, I'm used to performing all the time, even when the camera's not on.
Right.
And that's the problem, right? I would perform just because, people need me to be positive. I'm the oldest in my family, and my family had gone through all kinds of trials and challenges. And so they needed me to be their rock, the one to like be the peacemaker. And so I took on that role. And I was like, yeah, I'm totally fine. I'm totally okay. I'm always going to be positive. I have to help everyone out. And I remember my brother struggled a ton in life. And so I felt like I had to be the rock and help him out all the time. Well, he's a shining star now. He's doing fantastic, which is amazing. But the crazy thing was, I'm like, what is my identity now?
Yeah.
Like, where do I go? What do I do now that he's doing great in life?
Yeah.
Right. And so I had to learn how to stop performing and just be. And, you know, I'm a man of faith. I'm a man of God. And I've always would pray a lot. And I would say, like, what should I be focusing on? What should I be doing? Especially during COVID. I remember doing that a lot, being like, where should I put my energy? And so much of the downloads and the information I was getting was like, focus on having fun.
I love that.
Just focus on being. And I said, why is it so important that I have fun? He said, because then finally you'll be authentic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh. And it was interesting because I was so goal driven. And not that I'm not, I still have goals.
Yeah.
But I started learning that I was already enough before I set out to accomplish my goals. Right?
Yes.
I didn't realize that I had suddenly used my goals and my achievements as a way of saying, oh, look how good I am.
And making that your identity.
Making that your identity.
Versus your inherent value.
Yes. And I was told I already have incredible inheritance of an incredible value already. So I can create goals for the sake of having more joy and sharing more joy with other people. And it took on a dramatic shift, right? And now I try to live a lot more present. And now I value relationships and stuff a lot more than the accomplishments that we're going to have together or whatnot, right? Because the memories I'm making with my friends, when I look back on my life, those are the things I'm thinking about, instead of like, oh, look at that time I won the spelling bee.
Right. Yep.
Actually, you know what? I do like the spelling bee. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Good for you. You won.
Yeah,
That means
I won.
you're really smart.
Right, exactly. Right. But the thing was, like, the memories I had with my friends and stuff, those are the things that matter the most to me, right? So it's an interesting place to graduate from that old mindset to the new one, even though it's extremely painful to go through that.
Yeah, it is.
So right now, how did your boys cope with that whole experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, they were all really young, and that doesn't mean they didn't cope, but it's a different experience, right? My oldest was 10, my next one was 8, and then 5 and 2. The baby was 2. So it was this change in their reality. But the thing is, like, as their mom, I wanted to make sure that they had this world that was still stable.
Mm.
And that meant I was the stability piece, right? I was the rock that created this foundation for them. So that put a lot of pressure and stress on me as I'm trying to process all this. But I think that my objective became, like being really strong for them so that they could have as little upset as possible. I don't know that that's the right or wrong objective. It's just what I did because it was probably a coping mechanism for me. And so I think I started trying to make fill this void that they had so that they wouldn't feel it. Of course, that's never going to work, right? So the first year was really interesting because I don't feel like it affected them too much. We didn't talk about Dad very much. I had a lot of anger for him going out and paragliding because it was a reckless thing. And it was a high extreme sport. And the night he went out, the winds were really high. He shouldn't have been out there. There was all these factors that led to why he crashed. And that's what had happened. He crashed and it was a wind eddy that he got caught in. Mm-hmm. And he was really proficient in what he did, but the circumstances did not support experience.
Right. And it's interesting. I mentioned I've done the sport before, and the trainer, and I've only done it a few times, mm-hmm. and my trainer was like, early morning or late in the evening when the wind is barely like 7 miles an hour, maybe. And he's like, if it's above like 15, don't go. And I'm like, you gotta be safe and sorry, right?
In that context, that night it was 18 to 22 miles an hour.
Right.
And he'd been out in 15 to 18, even up to 20. And he's like, oh, I'm super proficient at this. So, I know this is the standard. I'm going to push it. And that was his personality. And that was kind of part of our value is like, let's see how far we can push this, And when it came to safety things, we were a little more lax. And, again, if I had a regret, that would be one thing that I would go back and address is like, actually, let's be more cautious in these certain things. But it was like this, again, that Superman complex of like, we're above reality. And that's another illusion that is a lie when you believe you make decisions that will hurt your life. Even though they look from the outside like, oh, they're doing such big things. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, but at what cost?
At what cost, right? Yeah, I'm also an avid snowboarder. And my mom's always like, Sharon, be careful, don't do anything crazy. And I never do, mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know why, I guess I've never had that complex. And so I don't do jumps, I don't do mm-hmm. any of that stuff because I'm like, I don't feel comfortable doing those things. I'm like, I know where my limits are. And so thankfully, as a result of it, I've gone for years and years and I've never really gotten hurt mm-hmm. because I knew like, okay, this is where my limits are. I don't really feel the need to push them because I just want to have fun here in the moment. Yeah. And I think it all goes back to what do you value?
Right. Exactly.
And at what point does it stop being fun?
Yeah.
And start being a little too reckless, right?
Right.
Now, your YouTube channel, of course, took a dramatic shift mm-hmm. after Grant's passing. So what's happening with it right now?
So kind of back to that moment, it was a huge blessing that we had set it up to kind of basically be able to run on its own. Now, the challenge with that is we did not set it up in a way to run on its own without Grant. And I was a big part of the channel, but he was the face of it. Mm-hmm. I was doing a lot of the behind the scenes, a lot of the consulting with like, okay, and the coaching with the Grant, like, this is how this is coming across. This is how you want to like provide better value for the viewer. This is how the viewer's experiencing it, and we had a lot of really amazing experiences as we evolved from that first video to becoming very, very professional. And we had 2 hosts at the time, and I just kind of took 6 months to not do anything because we had a good production schedule. We had, everything was kind of in place, and I just couldn't really engage. And so after about 6 months, I kind of started like learning the ropes of the things that I wasn't involved in. That was a huge learning curve, but it also gave me a sense of purpose, which helped me get through some of that space of, how do I deal with this loss? Because here's a place where, my husband created this incredible passion that he shared with the world. And then he wasn't able to do it anymore because of the, you know, the burnout that he was experiencing based on that decision to work more than to be balanced. And so it turned out to be a huge blessing for our family with his death. However, there was a lot that needed to be, you know, like stabilized and transformed and put into place in a way that it would function without him, because that was never one of our objectives, is to have him out of it fully. And now we're looking at this, and it's a whole new world in YouTube, because at this point, you know, there's lots of YouTubers, there's lots of creators, and you are your own brand. So the question became, can we make this YouTube channel a brand versus the person a brand? Mm-hmm. And, you know, we're still going through that process. And the answer is yes, but it's never really been done before, where a channel's had the creator actually die and not be a part of it anymore. I am aware now of a few channels where that's happened, but you know, it was one of the first big ones where that had happened.
It was crazy. I mean, everyone heard about it, right? And it was just such a shock to a lot of the YouTubers.
Yeah, and a lot of the fans were just like, how could this happen? Like, you were my idol. You were the reason I went to, you know, engineering school. You were the reason that I got my degree in this. You were the reason I started science. And it was this kind of blanket mentality of like, whoa, all of us, like this reality that we thought, you know, we get a video every week, and now what's going to happen, you know, and it kind of transferred that shock that I had of like, wait, you know, we're not going to wake up and be a family and have breakfast together anymore. Like, and it's like, whoa, what's going to happen to this channel? And, it's been a process of discovering what that is. And so now, one of my greatest objectives is to create not just legacy. That's a really important part for me. But again, you know, like living in the past doesn't bring the most powerful future, and living in the future doesn't bring the most powerful present. But a balance of combining all of those parts of your vision and bringing them into the present is what I found is creating a lot of power for me in my life, but also in the channel. And so what we've done is we've gone through a lot of testing and transition and trying different things, and some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. And a lot changed with COVID. You know, you would think that a YouTube channel would be one of the best businesses to have in COVID. But based on some of the other world events that were happening at the time with the elections and just other social issues, our channel was not promoted anymore like it was before with the algorithms, which that was a hard thing for us to accept, because it was like we almost felt like we were kind of just given this success because the channel had grown so much and because there was this momentum, and to have that change again was really hard. And again, it's like, okay, you know, what if this just goes away? Like, what if this doesn't become sustainable? And then it's like, actually, I want it to be sustainable because I want the legacy of what my husband created to continue to move on. And I don't want to get stuck in the past and making it be all about him and, you know, what he wanted, because he had his own flaws in even the mentality that he had as he created, you know, and I could see them, but he was in his own way in some aspects that prevented us from creating other avenues of success, even within the channel. And so it's like, okay, one positive aspect of this is that that block is now gone. So how can we explore creating more in this path? And how can we explore creating more in this path? So right now we have a female host, and she's just solo. And, you know, before we had hired a team to kind of go back and forth and create this energy on camera. And when we progressed to this place where, you know, what are the transitions the channel needs? We found this really amazing woman. She has a degree in meteorology, and she's been the main host for the last little while. And what I've seen from that is, you know, what about women in STEM? And there's not a lot of there are some, but there's not a lot of big YouTubers in STEM. You know, we've got Mark Rober, we've got, you know, all these different males that are just really amazing. But what about having, you know, this open space for women to be in STEM? And so that's another objective. And
awesome.
Just to clarify, Grant was not against that at all. But it's just another aspect of like, what can we create that's bigger than what was before?
Exactly, right. And this is one of the things I was mentioning to you, like my friend Colin Karchner, who had passed away, had now created a legacy, the Save the Kids legacy.
Yeah.
And he was the face of it. But now that he's gone, it's like, well, the movement still has to continue.
Yeah. And the mission's still important. Like kids still need that.
Absolutely.
And for us, it's like science is still a process of discovery. Like how can we create this lifestyle of curiosity, this lifestyle of creativity, this lifestyle of feeling empowered to answer the questions that you have versus like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's really cool. Like I'm excited that you guys are continuing to forge ahead, you know, and creating new paths, because I really think that those doors and things will open up for you, and there's going to be more avenues and more successes and more things. But I really appreciate you coming and sharing this story, because it's so powerful. I would love to ask you though, those that are listening, what advice would you give to someone that's going through something like what you went through, where their entire life has completely changed? Yeah.
So I go back to the grace piece, and I actually, I got it tattooed on my wrist because it's just so meaningful for me to remember that I can give myself the grace to be where I'm at versus trying to, you know, change the way I feel, trying to change my life, trying to do all these things that inevitably will happen because I know who I am. And I know that I'm not meant to stay in the sadness that I feel, but I also know I'm meant to experience it. And so I think a lot of that first year, I tried to just push it back. And then it came rolling in with a vengeance later on because I wasn't willing to go through it. I was trying to change it. I wasn't willing to go through it. And I think that contributed to even more of a dark place. And so my advice would be accept the reality, accept how you feel, not just accept it, but embrace it. It's like when you embrace how you feel, whether it's good or bad, which I don't really believe a good or bad. I believe that there's this life that you create and the choices you make create an outcome, and the outcome is something you prefer or something you may not prefer. And from either of those places you learn, and then you can start making decisions where the outcome is something you prefer and you like more. And that's kind of the process that I've, you know, taken for myself, is that, okay, if I'm having a really bad day, maybe it's a day that I stay home and I might have things planned. And that means that I'm going to adjust, because if I'm going into a situation where, you know, I've got this plan, I'm feeling all the emotions from the things that I've been through. This is the reality of my life. And I can't pretend like I'm happy all the time. And I don't want to go into this appointment or this business meeting or this, you know, school function or whatever it is in this low energy. So instead of going forward with what I had planned, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to take this space and I'm going to do whatever it is I need to do, whether it's, you know, stay home. Maybe I need to go out and do something, or, you know, I bought a house and I renovated it, and that was super therapeutic for me. And, you know, like just kind of finding the path of what fulfills you in the moment. And that doesn't necessarily mean what you had planned.
I love that. I love that so much. I mean, I think it's, you know, you're talking about like this, I think all goes back to self-love, right?
Yeah.
And realizing, hey, I don't have to force myself to do anything. Yeah. Like just love myself enough to know, okay, I'm not feeling it. Last night was a perfect example. I went to a birthday party and it was a crazy, like it was just so like just crowded and full of tons of people. And I remember thinking, I really don't want to be here for very long. And I already had other plans. And so it was really nice to be okay with that feeling.
Yeah.
And being like, okay. And so I went and I said hello to my friend and then I took off.
Yeah.
And I felt great. I'm like, wow. Before, when I was younger, I would be like, no, I got to be here because like there's like a FOMO situation happening.
Right.
And now it's like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, Janae, I really, really appreciate you coming and sharing this story with us. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
You know, I think that just kind of going back to the way I have processed this, and like the biggest lesson that I've learned is listening to the voice that's inside of you. And people have this, you know, lots of definitions for this, like intuition, you know, if you're religious, like the power of God, light of Christ. It could also be like the universe directing you, or your higher self. All of these things that you can use to try and define what this is. But I've come to believe that there's this really intense guidance within yourself. And it's when you listen to that you are able to hear it more. And so, like your example of being at the birthday party, I really don't want to be here. Well, why don't you want to be there? It doesn't really matter why. That's what's coming up. That's what you're feeling. That's the reality of right now. And you can make a decision to say, okay, well, I'm just going to stay here anyway. And it might be fine, but you're going against what it is that you're feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And so your decision to say hello and then take off, it's honoring the reality of how you feel. Mm-hmm. And the reality of how you feel is your inner guidance. It's your direction. And when you listen to that, life starts coming together in a way that is so much more beautiful than anything you could ever plan for. Doesn't mean you don't make plans. It just means you listen and you follow. And that is the true power of creation in my life that I've come to find. And it means accepting the bad days and staying in my bed in my pajamas sometimes and not feeling one bit guilty for it.
Yeah.
And knowing that that's actually contributing to my success. And it's completely changed my perspective on how I approach my life.
I can't think of better words to end the podcast. That was incredible. I feel like you just answered the flow of the universe in that exact statement, right?
Yeah, and it's within yourself. It's not outside of yourself. It's not in the universe. Mm-hmm. It's in you.
It's in you.
And then the universe responds to it.
Absolutely. The universe is the byproduct of what's going on inside of you.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Janae, for this time. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Of course.
Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know. Thanks so much, and have a great day.